Hi, I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday and it's time for The Fix.
Today we dig deep with our panel of experts into why business needs to be held accountable for its role in the state capture project and why it's important that they appear before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. Then we look at how to build efficient tax collection services in Africa and how it strengthens the ability of the continent to build solid institutions with integrity in developing economies. And as is custom, we take a look at what's made news headlines in the weekend papers and why. The Fix starts now.
Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold the decision makers to account. We tell you why it matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. The Justice Ministry has set up a special tribunal on fraud and corruption, as well as illicit money flows, to commence operations next month. The measures are being put in place by Justice Minister Ronald Lamola and have been gazetted and come into effect in October. This will give real impetus and momentum to the recovery of billions of stolen monies and is a swift mechanism to end the era of impunity. Well, joining me now to discuss how business will cooperate for their role in the process is the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, Busi Mavuso. She's speaking to us from our Durban studio. Then I've got on my panel here Kaya Sitole, who is of course representing the accounting profession, as well as Nishan Bolton, who's from the Ahmed Katrada Foundation, and we've got Sabelo Sekiti, who is an investigative journalist with the Mail and Guardian. Gentlemen, lady, good morning. Thank you very much for joining me. Let me start with you, Busi, in Durban. The conference yesterday, the first attempt to actually get business to look into their own role in terms of their complicity with the state capture project. How prepared is business to actually play their part at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry?
Thanks, Karima. The line is not very clear, but I think, look, we have come out as business, I think about 3 or 4 years ago already, to say that we'd like to actually see how we can be meaningfully involved in rebuilding what has been broken in this country, in rebuilding the economy. And I think it is to that end that our second strategic pillar is focused on the protection and strengthening of key institutions. We identified these institutions that are actually the bedrock, of the South African economy, and we have identified these institutions that are actually responsible for ensuring that our democracy and our constitution is carried out in the manner that it's supposed to. And we have worked earnestly, as business to ensure that we support and strengthen these institutions, because I think we have realized over the past 10 years just how painful it is, as a society and as a business, to have a state that is dysfunctional. So our focus, therefore, for the next few years is to say that how do we ensure that those institutions are strengthened? But you'd also remember that we worked very closely with the civil society organizations that were actually working towards ensuring that they hold us as business accountable and ensure that they hold the state, accountable. You would know that we worked with the first cohort of the people.
Busi, let me come in here. I spoke to KPMG. They are one of the 4 biggest auditing firms in the world. And I asked them specifically to come on air. None of them were available. Now, the reason why I'm choosing KPMG is because they've had several opportunities to come clean about the extent of the involvement in state capture, but they haven't. Every time they've had to be smoked out. How do you account for institutions such as KPMG? Do they weaken or strengthen your ability to actually cooperate and make business take responsibility for its actions?
You know, Karima, I think we're making a mistake if we're going to expect these institutions to actually do this on their own free volition and on their own free will, right? When we have the evidence that we're sitting with, you know, as government, you know, and as the judiciary, you know, in terms of the extent that your Bain, your KPMG, your Steinhoff, the SAP, the McKinsey, the trillions, and whatever the case is, you have the evidence, you know, that actually implicates these institutions in as far as the damage that they've done to weaken these key institutions in this country. So why are we waiting for them, you know, to say that come and cooperate and whatever the case is? For me, unless and until we see people in orange overalls, you know, then this is actually a futile exercise. Because I think the logical conclusion, right, for everything that we have unearthed so far, in as far as the Zondo Commission and the state capture inquiries are concerned, it ought to be people that are actually going to have to, you know, be sitting in jail. There's going to have to be a litigation or two. At the moment, actually, what is derailing our investment project in terms of actually getting foreign direct investors into the country, they are saying that we are worried about the industrial scale looting that has taken place in South Africa, and yet there isn't a single person in jail.
Okay,
so I don't know why we are waiting for business to actually hand themselves over.
Hold that view. I want to bring Kaya in. Kaya Sithole, you are from the accounting profession. Is Busi not just kicking the can down the road?
Unfortunately, it feels like that's a thing, because, Karima, you must keep in mind that when it comes to, you know, the burden of proof, the state law enforcement agencies have to find a way to prove beyond reasonable doubt that you're guilty of something before they hold you before the courts. The constituencies of BLSA, for example, do not have to satisfy that burden. They simply have to say that on the basis that we've seen what you did at SARS, what Bain did at SARS, what McKinsey did at ESCOM, they have to say that on the basis of what we've said, we are going to distance ourselves from you. So the question we should be putting to BLSA is how many of their constituent members are still using these consulting firms and these auditing firms in actually just executing their operations? Because for them, it's much easier to say we're distancing ourselves. The state has to have a much bigger, a much higher burden of proof. And to then simply say the state must do the work, while these people themselves will have a much easier job to do, to simply say we're distancing ourselves from you, we're actually going to make you suffer. And we want to take a stand as business to say if the state is going to be fixed, we cannot be associated with the people that broke it. BLSA has got a much easier job to do, but they're not doing it.
Okay, so business, according to Kaya Sithole, is not playing their part. Nishan, I had the Commissioner for SARS here last week, Professor Edward Kisvetter, and he said that they've recommended to Treasury that they actually ban certain institutions like Hogan Lovells, like Bain, like Gartard, from actually doing business with the state. The Treasury is the ultimate arbiter of that decision. Is that the right approach from the state? But more importantly, do you agree with Kaya that BLSA can do more to actually hold their membership to account?
Look, I think that it's important for SARS and the state to do what is required from their part. But I think if we just look at the companies mentioned, it doesn't go to the heart of the matter as what made this possible in the first place. And that, I think, within government need not wait for Zondo. I don't get the sense that within government, in an overarching manner, they've actually looked at what made state capture possible within the systems of government and what needs to be done to fix up all of those things. I can understand BLSA and I appreciate that. But I think I am yet to see a group of CEOs outside the offices of Bain or McKinsey or any of these people mentioned joining civil society and saying, we want you to come and do more than saying that you are sorry.
Yeah.
Because I think that will show a different level of commitment to the activism that is required to address this problem. I think business has shown some kind of awareness, but I don't think has done more than name and shame people. I think they're working with various authorities to strengthen capacity, but they also have to ask themselves the same question that government is. What is it that made this possible?
Yeah.
What are the practices within business that they need to start looking and rooting out if much more effectively than they have to date.
Absolutely. Sabelo, you have investigated a lot of state capture, news-related stories. When you've looked at the role of business in the project, what made it so easy for an auditor at a company, before we even get to an external audit firm like KPMG, what made it so easy for them to turn a blind eye? Was it the culture of the organization? Was it in the DNA of the companies to kind of do underhand business? Because we know for every corrupt politician, there's a business person making the offer.
Yeah. Look, Karima, I think from my experience, and I mean, I'm taking this also from the perspective that after you report on these things, what do the companies do? Most of the times the companies exit these people, they give them bonuses, they allow them to take the cash in, they share options, and the person leaves. So essentially, the person is only possibly barred by the disgrace from getting another job. But he's possibly made enough millions to set him up,
The 5 lifetimes.
Yes, they never pursue, in any civil litigation to recover any monies on behalf of their client in the case of external. They never actually refer anything to law enforcement. So, I mean, we always complain about government, allowing, civil servants to hop from government department to government department.
And recycle people.
Yes, and I mean, this is precisely what business does as well. I don't believe that business is actually serious about what they're saying. And I mean,
Busi, let me bring you in here. The 3 panelists here are all of the opinion that you can do more as Business Leadership South Africa. For example, where are you when people are marching against corruption? Why are you not outside the offices of Bain? Why are you not outside the offices of KPMG? And why are you not having a list of names that you recommend nobody does business with? Because that is the only way you can actually get to them apart from law enforcement agencies. You can hurt them in their pockets where it matters most.
Karima, you would remember that Business Leadership South Africa is the only organization actually that has suspended these organizations when this corruption erupted, right? Or when these scandals erupted. The organizations that are actually members of BLSA, McKinsey is not a member of BLSA, Steinhoff is not a member of BLSA, Trillion is not a member of BLSA, but those that are actually in our fold, we've actually made a very clear statement, because I think about it, from where we're sitting as a membership-based organization, what more can we do rather than to say that you don't belong to sit around the table with us if this is how you conduct your business, right? We have actually made sure that our members sign integrity pledges.
Let me ask you this question. Why did you readmit KPMG? What about KPMG's behavior has changed?
But you see, I think what Kaya is saying, and I think it was Kaya who was talking earlier on, the architecture and system of business is not inherently corrupt. And I want to make that statement. I'm going to say it again. The architecture and system of business is not inherently corrupt. You have corrupt elements within businesses. But I don't think the entire architecture is actually inherently corrupt. Because think about it, Karima, you therefore probably have to say all the CASAs in this country are actually inherently corrupt, and therefore SAICA must be shut down. And I don't think that would be fair. You've got corrupt chartered accountants that have actually enabled, the system to be corrupt, but I don't think the entire architecture and system of SAICA is actually corrupt. So I think the most critical thing for me is that when these corrupt elements are actually found within organizations, we have to act very decisively to ensure that we actually weed out this corruption. But more importantly, you have to look at your systems and say that what has enabled this within KPMG, within Deloitte, within SAICA, whatever the case is, what has enabled this to happen? So what is it about my systems that are actually flawed, that is actually enable such, happenings to actually continue? And I think that is where it's going to have to be. But also, I think we are being very mistaken to look at business in isolation. Because, Karima, business is a microcosm of this society, right? So the question that we actually have to be asking and be answering for is that there is a moral degeneration corruption in this country. And because business is a microcosm of this society, then we actually find ourselves as individuals within businesses making these bad decisions, because obviously we are not, we don't live in isolation, and we are actually somehow affected. But the architecture and system of business is not inherently corrupt.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you on that because I believe differently. But let me start with a question that you didn't answer. Why did you allow KPMG back? What about the architecture in KPMG has changed for you to be convinced that they're now a company that we ought to do business with and that you can have part of your association?
So all the people that were found to have enabled the state capture, SARS and whatever the case is, or have enabled the state capture within KPMG have actually been gotten rid of, right? And they've actually undergone a very thorough and diligent exercise of looking at their systems and how they take on cases, how they actually conduct their businesses when they're with clients, and how they engage with those clients that they deem to be actually overexposed in as far as corruption is concerned, SOE organizations, for instance. So we have satisfied ourselves, and I think if you want me to send you the files of everything that KPMG has implemented to actually cleanse themselves and to ensure that this is not found within their systems again, and I can actually send them those files. So we have had lengthy discussions with Nhlamu at the time when we were CEO and with Professor Wiseman Kutlu in terms of what they've done from a systems perspective internally as an organization, and we satisfied ourselves that they've actually dealt as far as possible, with everything that was actually wrong, within the systems of KPMG, as it were. And as I'm saying,
let me bring in my other guests to get their opinion. Busi, hold your thoughts. Hold your thoughts. I see my panel shaking their heads in disbelief. Let me start with you, Nishan. Do you believe, Busi?
No, I think there's some things that is correct. But how do we judge whether a business entity has completely, in a sense, changed and gotten rid of all of the bad practices? So at this seminar yesterday, some of the victims of that report of KPMG were of the view that they themselves have not been engaged with sufficiently by KPMG to actually understand how it is that those reports came about and what it is that they have done to change or withdraw the report in its entirety that now takes away all of the kind of verdicts that many of them have been subjected to. So if those victims feel that not sufficient has been done, then I think there are still questions to be answered. Is KPMG the same that it was 3 years ago? I think no. I think that there have been moves in the right direction, but I'm not sure whether it has completely changed all of the systems, the procedures, the policies to actually to say that it is now a company that in future will not go down the same route. So
there's no evidence basically that the DNA of the company has changed.
I just wanted to conclude in a very different way. If you take the H&M incident, they met with the Human Rights Commission, agreed on a public 7-point action plan. They have reported on those 7 points over the last year or two in terms of what they've done, what they haven't done, what is still outstanding. I don't think we've seen a similar process here. So we don't actually know why they think what they did was wrong. We don't know what the action steps were, and we don't see a public reporting on what, in fact, they've done.
Now, this lack of transparency is very business specific. If, for example, a trade union disagrees with the government policy, they've got NEDLAC, they go there, they have to risk their reputations, they have to perhaps sell compromises to their members. You don't see business, for example, speaking with that kind of commitment to processes, and you don't see them doing a mea culpa. Are you convinced that Busi's reasons for readmitting KPMG are legitimate, Sabelo?
No, not at all. I simply don't believe it. For instance, like Nishan touched on the rogue unit matter, that report is being used by the current public protector to target the Minister of Public Enterprises. We still don't know what happened behind the scenes that led the people that collaborated on that report to actually come up with those findings. Did they get them from SARS? Can they tell us? We don't know what happened with Mr. Saluji from KPMG, who was in bed with the Gupta family, for instance. We don't know the actual intricacies, the detail of how they did what they did to siphon money out of Freda, you know, for instance. And I mean, those are the things that are going to help us. If we're there, then we need to look at legislation around, you know, procurement, for instance. We need to tighten it. Those are the people that can talk to us about, these are the loopholes that we used to get around the system. You know, this is what I mean when I say we need them to be more transparent. Help us be able to, not just KPMG get to a better PR platform, but for the entire country to actually get a meaningful change.
Kaya, you're nodding your head.
So the first thing that we have to get right is that these institutions did not break BLSA, they broke down the country at large. It is completely inadequate for us to be told that BLSA and these institutions have had a behind-the-scenes engagement and they've decided that some form of repentance has occurred, so therefore these people are worth readmitting. It is completely inadequate. It wasn't BLSA that was broken, it was South Africa. So if South Africans aren't aware of what it is that has gone on in order to sort of start this path towards evolution, then the evolution just simply hasn't happened. Yesterday, we actually had Johan van Lochenberg as one of the examples at the seminar saying to KPMG, that report that you refuse to withdraw in its entirety is affecting not just me, but 35 other families that were implicated in this report that you guys refuse to retract. We asked KPMG, I specifically raised the question, please tell us what exactly prompted you 2 years after the event to then go back to that report and say to us, well, actually there are issues in this report, because that is not what happens. You close a file and then you move on. There must be something extraordinary that forces you to say, let us go and reopen the vault, look at that report again, and then come out to the public and say, well, actually, it looks like some of the things that you did were incomplete. So I think it is an inaccurate conversation for BLSA to say that they will engage behind the scenes, because tomorrow they'll be readmitting McKinsey, the day after Trillion might just become a member of BLSA. And you cannot have that situation where we're saying BLSA represents business and we want to trust business, and yet they think that they can have these opaque conversations, readmit the people that have broken the country, and then come out to South Africa and say, we've done the assessment, you're good to go. It's just not the way it works.
Okay, Busi, let me use the words of Kaya. Why are you having opaque, behind-the-scenes, non-transparent conversations with companies who literally ruined South Africa? And why do you think that we should take your word that business as an entirety is not corrupt, that it is not prone to being corrupt, when your remedy for finding out whether people have genuinely changed around is one that you are keeping non-transparent and away from the public eye?
So I've not said that business is not corrupt. I've said that there are corrupt elements within business, and when those corrupt elements within businesses are found, they are going to have to be decisively dealt with. So the conversations that we have, you know, with our members, I don't know what Kaya means when he says that they are behind the scenes. I mean, I think he was part of the conference, for instance, at the Daily Maverick, you know, when we brought KPMG and Bain to come and actually answer for their role, you know, in the state capture and what they've done and what it is that they're actually going to continue to do to ensure that they repatriate. And I think we've had these conversations at GIBS. We've had these conversations at the Vet School of Governance. We've been actually very public. We are the only business organization that has actually been very public in actually bringing these member organizations to the fore to say that come and account for what it is that you have done. So when they are saying that these conversations are behind the scenes, are actually not, I'm not sure what that means. And I think the second issue that is being raised, you know, to say that if there are no criminal cases, or if we are not seeing action, what has actually happened to these people? I think, Karima, you're going to have to understand that BLSA does not put people in jail. I wish we could put people in jail so that therefore we can take some of these issues to its logical conclusion. If we have suspended these people, if we have actually, you know, ensured that all of this information that we have been brought to the fore, if we have actually taken these companies and brought them before the public for them to be engaged by the public and to answer, you know, questions that are actually coming from the public and civil society in terms of their role in the state capture project. And I think if businesses have actually opened criminal cases against the individuals that have actually been found to be corrupt within their own organizations, then the law from therefore is going to have to take its course. So I don't know therefore what more BLSA is going to have to do versus being ultimately transparent, you know, and actually holding these organizations to come in front of the public to talk about what it is that has been done. And I agree with Kaya, what has been done has not actually just impacted BLSA, it has actually impacted the entire economy. That is why therefore the judiciary and government is going to have to come in and say that we have this evidence. What therefore are we going to do to ensure that you actually pay the way you are supposed, or to actually show that you are actually being prosecuted for the crimes that you have committed. So yes, it's not a crime against BLSA, it's a crime against the economy. So that's why all the social partners are actually then going to have to come on board and play their own role. We have done what we're supposed to do as a membership-based organization. So I'm actually not sure what more, you know, is expected from what we have done, or what are the inadequacies. And I'd actually like to hear, actually interestingly, Karima, from the panelists, to say that if what we have done as the BLSA is inadequate, what more would they like to see the BLSA doing from our own membership
Let me
companies
give them
that
an
is
opportunity
within
to
our
do
control?
so. Kaya, you were mumbling as Busi was speaking. Please tell the public what you were mumbling about.
Look, I think the key issue here is that we must always remember that if we have conversations as elites, if we have conversations at Gibbs or at Wits Business School, those are conversations between people like Busi and myself, where KPMG can come and talk. Again, we're not the ones that were sinned against. It was the entire country. So the question, the litmus test should be, if Busi leaves the studio now and she walks around in Durban and she asks any South African, do you think that KPMG has done enough in order for them to be readmitted into the social fold? Do you think that this particular company has done enough? And she doesn't get an answer. It means that South Africans are not in the same level of understanding that she and I might be. So the question is not what she and I know. It's a question of what South Africans, the people whose institutions were broken, know about this. So for a lot of people, they actually aren't even aware that KPMG has been readmitted by BLSA. And the point that we're saying here is that she says there were files that they interrogated to then say you guys are in the same position that you were in probably long before the crisis happened, so therefore you're being readmitted. Only BLSA has ever seen those files. So nobody else in South Africa actually knows what it takes for a company of that nature to then get itself readmitted. So therefore we don't know what will be the basis of McKinsey being readmitted tomorrow, being readmitted the other day, and that is the point. It doesn't matter what she and I know. It's a question of the people whose money was stolen, whose resources and institutions were made dysfunctional. What do they understand, and do they share the same understanding? And the answer is no.
Okay, Nishan, you pointed out one institution that had recommendations of an implementation plan and they had to report publicly. Should BLA force KPMG to, as part of readmitting, publicly announce what have they changed, how they're going to prosecute people who are involved in future, and how they're changing the culture in the organization that gave rise to this maleficence?
I think it will help. It will help set a kind of model for all other similar entities. Because look, at the end of the day, you don't want businesses destroyed in this country. We want them to be able to be fixed. We want all of these kinds of practices to be eradicated. But we also want the kind of internal accountability that BLSA might have used for them to make us aware of what that has been, so that I think we are all, and we can begin, because what we need to be talking about is not only BLSA, but business in its entirety, both big and small, and the culture that makes it possible for people to think that this is the right thing to do. And because that has gone way beyond big corporates. It has now seeped to municipal levels. Small business entities all believe that this kind of way of working is correct. And that's what business and ourselves have to begin to address, is how do we eliminate this within society? But secondly, how do we then work with the state to ensure that the weaknesses in their own systems and the kind of political system that makes this possible needs to change? Because that is really the bigger issue that we collectively have to deal with. But I do think that the KPMG readmission is perhaps a starting point to develop the model that for accountability that we all need to be aware of what the elements are.
Okay, Sabela, I'm going to give you the last word. We've run out of time.
So I think for me, just in as far as government and prosecutions, law enforcement, BLSA knows just how withered our law enforcement capacity is. They know that we don't have investigators that can actually go in and delve into the sort of complexities where these crimes took place. They are sitting with the member organizations that know, but are they then transferring that information to law enforcement to act on? Are they also helping to capacitate law enforcement to be able to investigate these crimes?
Okay, final word to you, Busi. They've all given their recommendations. I want to ask you, why is BLSA not laying criminal charges against its member companies when they've broken rules?
Karima, is that question to me?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. So our companies have actually laid criminal charges against these individuals that have actually been found to be corrupt, number one. And I think the second one, the last gentleman who spoke to say that, but why are we actually not working with these, institutions to ensure that we capacitate them? And my answer is that we are working with the NPA in the division that is actually being set up, that is actually going to be looking at the Zondo evidence that is actually coming out. We are actually dealing with Shamila Patoy to ensure that that division is actually properly capacitated, but more importantly, so that we can see quicker turnaround times that are actually going to be coming out to ensure that really the law does take its course.
Okay, Busi, answer my question. Why have you, as an umbrella organization, not laid criminal charges against people who are your members?
Criminal charges have already been laid. What criminal charges are you now talking about? They've been laid by the companies against the individuals that were found to be corrupt within their elements. So I'm not sure which criminal charges have to be laid against who now, because criminal charges against those individuals within companies have been laid by their respective organizations.
Okay, what I was going to ask you, or what I wanted an answer to, but we've run out of time, is why you as a leadership organization leave it up to your members to do the legwork. Why don't you as a leadership unit act on your leadership role and actually hold them to account by laying criminal charges, like organizations like Outer has done, and several other civil society organizations, including Corruption Watch, the Helen Suzman Foundation, etc. These are all big institutions that have actually gone to law enforcement agencies. Are you saying that the companies have already done the work and BLSA has no role to play?
So I think what we have decided to do, and what I think is very strategic for us, is to play where anyone has not played, right? So the individual criminal charges have been laid. So for us, that's a tick. It's already been taken care of. But no one is suspending these companies. So we are coming in and we are doing what already has not been done in terms of going ahead and duplicating efforts, which is to ensure that these member organizations are not part of any business constituency by suspending them, but more importantly, working with them to say that what is wrong within your systems so that you can ensure that you fix those, your systems, your procedures, and how you actually do business. So we are actually going in and we are going to spaces where no one has bothered to look at, because it's all good and well to deal with the symptom, but we actually want to be dealing with the root to say that what has caused this breakdown in systems in the first place. And that is where
we've run out of time. We've got to wrap it. Thank you very much for making time and for going into our Durban studios. I know you were on holiday with your family. Much appreciated. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Kaya, Nishan, Sabelo, thanks for your contribution. Up next, when we return, we look at how to build efficient tax collection services on the continent. Stay tuned.